remember that? 2012 movie. It's over. We're gonna send you all the. Thank you. That's why I bought it. Not because you love it.
All right, you are being recorded now, just FYI. So funny stories are captured from the front row, so just be aware.
Maybe the watches.
Yeah, it's a distinct possibility that they might need a good laugh. Is, you know. All right, so we are going to do lab 2 today in class. I am getting idle open. I'm gonna go ahead and make it bigger where you guys in the back can see. If you can't see in the back, and I'm not making it big enough, you need to please let me know. All right, so I had several questions, like I was saying earlier, about the stuff being turned in. I did actually have a few people turn in the shell window and not the actual file. Again, I think it was mostly my online students because I told all you guys repeatedly not to do that, and I tried to check behind you in class. But just as a refresher, in case you missed it, remember we're always going to go to File, New File, and we're going to do all of our code in the new file and make sure that we save it, first name, last name, assignment number. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. If you leave the assignment number off of it, you're probably okay because I download them all together into one folder for each assignment. But if you leave your first name and your last name off of it, and you just give me the assignment number, that makes it a little bit harder. I can figure it out on the first ones because they require you to put your name in on as part of the print statements, but later your name's not necessarily required in the code. So please, first name, last name. So that being said, we're going to work on this in class. I'm recording it. It seems like it's actually working this time, and I finally have figured out the microphone issue. Shared computers are a lot of fun to work with because you never know what the next user is going to do. So bear with me. We'll get there. Yeah, I have a computer science degree, but tech fails me also. It's okay. Anybody that knows my sons can ask them. I hand them my cell phone whenever it goes wonky because they grew up with a cell phone in their hand and they come back and then I can find the menu I'm looking for.
You're a mom.
I'm a mom. Yeah, go figure. I'm also old and don't want to learn new things. Please ignore at the top of this one because it's a PDF and I can't find my original document, or I couldn't find it when I was uploading it to change the date. Ignore the date at the top of this one. It is obviously not summer of 2018, right? Unless we just took a trip back in time. All right, so just like every other time, the labs have the objectives at the top, what we're trying to get done. So you're always going to see stuff about algorithms because I'm hoping you're always making a plan before you start. It's my hope. We want you to be able to use some of the Python functions, like the math functions and some of the print functions and stuff. But we are eventually going to write our own functions. We're getting there very quickly. And then we want you to prompt the user for some input and do some simple math calculations. Don't kill the messenger if you don't think it's simple later, but it's fairly simple math calculations. I have a few math majors in here. If we get into something complex, I'll make them help you. Yeah, they seem excited about that. All right, so this is divided into two distinct parts. The two parts are not related to each other. So you're going to go, these don't have anything to do with each other, because we're trying to get you to practice concepts, not necessarily put a cohesive program together. This is just concept practice. So part A, or step A, is going to be just the directions for getting started. Start idle. Create a file, which I did, first name, last name, lab 2. So I always go ahead and do the save as part where I know that it's not being saved somewhere as untitled, because how many files do I have in my computer and it's untitled at this point? It's kind of crazy. In here, because it's a shared computer, I have to put it on the desktop. You put it wherever you want to on your computer. The .py will automatically be put on there if it says Python file in the second box. So you don't have to put the .py on there. If you do put .py on there, then it's just going to be on there twice. And yeah, say .py when I download it. So that's all of A. We're just getting you started. B starts part 1. We're going to do miles per hour. We're going to promptly calculate miles per hour. MPH stands for miles. And all of you that are paying for gas right now need to know a little bit about miles per hour, right? All right. So on the first line, we're going to put a comment. So I'm getting you in the habit of commenting. It's a great habit because I will start grading you on them. So this is a requirement of your lab, right? If it says type this line of code and I go to grade it and that line of code is not there, I can take points off for it because it's in the directions. And if I don't teach you anything else in this class, I will teach you to follow directions precisely, because that's what computer science is all about. Very precise directions. So if this was a Word document, you could copy and paste that, but since it's a PDF, you can't copy and paste it, so you'll have to type it. So, and I'm not going to grade you on whether or not you spelt everything correctly or if you put it in exactly word for word the way I did it, but you should have a part 1 comment and it should roughly say the same thing, right? I like to abbreviate things. So we got a line of code. We have a comment already. And then we're going to prompt the user for how many miles they drove and put it into a variable. Again, the whole line of code is written for you, so all you have to do is copy it. And again, I'm shortening mine to make it stay on the screen. You can type the whole prompt if you want to. You can shorten the prompt as long as it makes sense. The prompts need to make sense. Don't shorten them to the point that I don't understand what you're abbreviating. And remember, I'm old and don't speak young people English a lot of times. My son starts talking. I'm like, what did you just say to me? Anyway. So, huh? Oh, good catch. I didn't close the quotes. I make typos. Feel free to correct me anytime. I would pretend that I do that on purpose, but I don't. I went back and put a space between my question mark and my quotes because when I print to the screen, I want it to have a space to make it look prettier for the user, and they can see that icon blinking and help them know that they need to type something. If you don't put the space, they're going to type right up against your question mark, or if you don't have a question mark, it's just a word, they're going to type right up against the word, and it's going to look funny. Is it gonna change how the program works? Not at all. It's just a visual, makes it look pretty. It's part of the user experience. We actually have whole classes on user experience now. So be aware, it's just a formatting. So we got that line in. Now, remember we talked about how we have to convert input from a string into a number, right? Because every input statement reads in as a string. So if you look at step 2 or step 3, it has a new line of code for you. That is the conversion. So we're going to take miles. We're going to set it equal to the conversion function. And we're going to put miles inside of the parentheses because that's what we're converting. The reason I set it equal to itself is because I want to override the string that's already in that variable. If I just did float miles, it would do it, but it wouldn't save it anywhere, and you haven't helped yourself in it. So now there's a screenshot of what you should have. Mine looks very similar. So as we go forward, you'll get less and less of me giving you the exact lines of code to copy and more of you having to do it on your own. But for the first few weeks, we do a lot of this, especially in the labs. Step 4. As part of our iterative incremental deployment or development, we should test the code we have written to make sure it works before we move on. I've written an input and a conversion. To make sure it works, I'm going to have a print statement. So this is a diagnostic print statement. And since I know what it is and it's just diagnostic and it's just for me, I'm just going to print out whatever the value is. Now, if I was doing this for a user, I'd make that print statement more useful and I tell them what I was printing. But this is just for me, it's just a testing thing, right? So run. How many miles have I driven? Let's say 9. Some of the number lock on 95. Hit enter, and it printed it out with a .0, which tells me that it converted it to a float. Yeah.
Not convert straight into floats.
Check your typing if you didn't misspell something. And I will be there in just a second. All right. So the next part. So what we did is I did this diagnostic print statement. I didn't make it as clear as the example because it was for me. I executed it. It ran. So now I don't need it anymore. So I'm going to go back to my file. And you can do 2 things here. You can comment it out if you think you need it again, or you can just delete it. Whichever makes you happy. I'm just going to comment it out for right now just to show that I put it in there. All right. So while I'm checking to see why his won't convert to string, you guys go ahead and start on 5 and 6. So you have 2 lines of code to type. The hours, your hours input, and convert hours to float.
Okay.
Okay. So now that I fixed that problem, if you do this, And you're thinking to yourself, why am I changing hours to a float? Why did I make it an integer? Maybe you're not thinking of it this way. That's where you put in fractional portions. Maybe you drove an hour and a half. You know, that sort of thing. And we could put in another print statement. And test it again because we want to get in the habit of testing. And now it tells me that 4 is 4.0. If you leave both print statements in, it'll print out both of them. But up to you. Now, am I saying that you have to put a diagnostic print statement in every 2 lines of code? No. But like I said, we're trying to demonstrate a point here. So we do it really frequently in this lab. Do you have to leave them all in for me to grade? No. You want to comment them out and show me that you did them? Great. If you delete them, that's fine too. Yes, sir. You have an error. Okay, I'll come check it in just a second. So I'm gonna go check his error and I'm gonna skip down here to 8 because I did the testing in 7 already, and let you guys start typing up the equation while I check in the back. All right. Just helpful hint for your day. The num lock is not usually on when you come in here. So make sure you press the num lock if you're trying to type numbers. And if it's prompting the user for some input, you have to put input in because it will not convert the return character or an empty string to a number because it's not a valid number. All right, so we'll comment this one out again. And now we're gonna do miles per hour. I'm gonna make the variable mph. And that's very simple math. It's the miles divided by the hours. And then you got to print it. Your average mph. Oh, well, okay, let me try to do this. You average. Oh, a different one.
Yeah.
Now, get this bigger. So we're gonna put in math. We set up another variable to hold our math answer. MPH is gonna hold the answer to miles divided by hours. We're gonna print out a nice little print statement that makes sense and is pretty for our user. So if we want everything in the green inside the quotes is go to print. You put a comma, the variable name, and then another comma to separate things, right? So let's see what happens. So if I drove 95 miles and I drove for 5 hours, I averaged 19 miles per hour on my trip. I don't know, I'm assuming that the computer did the math correctly. I'm not doing that in my head.
It is correct.
I knew that because the computer's not gonna do the math incorrectly unless I set the formula up incorrectly. Now, if I put hours divided by miles, then I would have a different answer, and that would be a logical error. The computer's not gonna find, and we'd have to figure it out. Which is why we test so frequently. All right. So 9 was to verify. I did. If you want to verify using my code or numbers that you don't want to check the math on, I usually in the verification section give you some sample numbers where you can check and see if they match. So in this case, if you put in 408, you should have got 50. If you put in 640.5 and 10.8, you should get 59.30555555. Because it doesn't round down to a number of decimal places unless we specifically tell it to do that, and we will tell it later how to do that, but we aren't doing it now. Questions? Anybody stuck? Everybody with me up to this point? Am I moving too fast for anybody? All right, part 2 starts at C, has nothing to do with miles per gallon. We're gonna do something else. So we're gonna put in another comment telling me that when I'm grading it, I can say, oh, they're starting part 2's code. These comments really help me when I'm grading because it breaks it up into the sections. So this one is going to calculate the length of a name and print out the total length of your first, middle, and last name, or your user's first, middle, and last name. Why do I do this? Because I read through, well, it's my assignment. But what you should do before you start this is read through it and see what you're doing. Because you notice that there's not a lot of code written for you in this section. The first one, I did the code, gave it to you. This one I didn't. So the first thing I would do is I would read all of part 2 just to see where I was going. Because the way my brain works, I want to group things together logically, but my logic may not be your logic. So remember, your code won't always look exactly like your neighbor's or mine. As long as it works, it doesn't really matter, as long as you follow the directions. So we're going to put in a comment. We're going to prompt for the first name. We're going to prompt for a middle name. We're going to prompt for a last name. We're going to print out the first, middle, and last name. We're going to print the length of the first name. And I did give you the code for this because it's a function we haven't used yet. Then we're going to print the length of the middle name, the last name, and then the length of all of them together. So we're going to get 3 inputs. We're going to find out what the length of those inputs are, and then we're going to do some simple math. Right? All right. So over here, you can hit enter and put as many white spaces in as you want to. The program does not care if you like to space things out that way. Feel free to put a blank line in to make it easier to read. Part 2. I'm not going to put the title of what part 2 is. I'm really okay in your comments if you just put part 1, part 2, part 3. You don't have to actually give me the title. I just need it broken up into parts. And you're saying, well, why did you write that on the line? Because somebody gave me these assignments and I've just been modifying, so I didn't write them the original assignments. So, I need variable for the first name. And oddly enough, I'm just going to call it first. You can call it first underscore name, but I'm just going with first. Now, why didn't I convert those? So I converted all the other floats. Why didn't I convert any of these? Because they're not numbers. Wasn't a trick question. It was really simple. So now if I want, now the next thing on step 5 is to print the first, middle, last name. So I can do print. Now, is there anything inherently wrong with this line of code? It's fine. The line of code will work. Now, will it put a space between first, middle, and last? Or will it run it all together? Well, let's test it and see. Python, it will actually put a space between them. In other languages, it would not. It would run them all together. The way it is. Yes.
So what if we did want them all together? Would we like have to add the strings?
You'd have to do it as a formatted string.
All right.
Or you can use plus signs, and then it would convert it to one long string. So the reason I point this out, that this is a Python thing, is because when you get to Java, if you're taking CS1, it will not work this way. It will just run them right up against each other. So we got it printing out the first, middle, and last name. Now let's talk about the length of the name. We haven't talked about this much or yet, but we did talk about that there's all sorts of built-in functions that automatically come with Python language. So when you downloaded idle, you got access to all these functions. Strings have a lot of functions that you can use on strings. They know how long a string knows, how long it is. So anything that's typed in characters and is seen as a string, it can answer questions about itself, sort of. So the functions will let you find out how long it is. The functions will let you shorten it, lengthen it, do all sorts of things to it. And well, I'll actually will show you in class. I think next week, but very shortly, I'll show you a website you can go to that you can look up some of the predefined functions. And it will become your best friend. Because when we move into more and more things, you're going to want to go look for stuff that's already created. So you're not wasting your time reinventing something that already exists. Because again, programmers are inherently lazy. So why reinvent something that's already in what we call the standard library? So in this case, when you look at this print line, it says print and then len item. Well, len is short for length. Again, computer programmers being lazy. Anytime you do len, open parentheses, a variable that's holding a string or just an actual string, and close the parentheses, it returns a number for how long it is. So in this example, it returns the number 8, but it doesn't save it because it's just printing it to the screen. We want to save our numbers because we know ultimately we got to add first, middle, and last together. So down here is the example of what it should look like after your code runs. Right? So we're going to work on that. So right now we've got first, middle, and last printing. Now we got to do the links. Now, do you have to store these as variables, the links, and use them? No, this particular case, you probably could just do the math inside the print functions. But I personally like to store everything and then do the math because then I don't screw up and need it later. So if I was writing a really long piece of code and I needed to know how long the middle name was in another part of the program, I would already have it stored. So let's do this real quick. I'm gonna do it my way, and then I'll show you the other way you can do it. And again, it's a programming style thing. It's up to you. Yes, sir.
The example of the output for part 2 says enter your first name twice.
That's the typo. It's a PDF. I can't fix it right now.
Fair enough.
It's a typo. Use your best judgment. If it repeats something, it's a typo.
Yeah.
I've been using this for 5 years. That's the first time somebody's caught that. So hi. All right. So I'm going to create a variable for length because, like I said, it's just the way my brain works. And I'm going to put, and then I'm going to do one for middle. And I think this also explains it a little bit better for you guys that are not familiar with programming. It gives you a visual to see what I did, what it's doing. So this function takes a number, creates a number for how long each one of those are, and stores it somewhere. And then when I get ready to do the print statements, I can just do I can't type today. And because I'm lazy, which is probably how it ended up with first in there several times on the output. So now I have a print statement that prints out those numbers that we stored. And when I get ready to do the whole name, I can just do the math inside of the print statement. Because it's going to do the addition before it prints. So now let's run it and see if it works. If you don't want to test the miles driven every time, you can comment that section out till you get ready to come back to it, but just make sure you uncomment everything you want graded. Sometimes it's just easier just to type it. I don't know. I'm just picking names at this point. Right? And when I test it, I do that. I just randomly choose names. Sometimes I use my own because I'm just used to typing my own and I know how long it is. Sometimes I just randomly type in garbage. Just to see what comes out. Yeah.
This is just a weird question. I feel like I had to submit it twice and
I always grade the last one. If you do submit things more than once, I always grade the one at the bottom. The last one submitted based on its timestamp. Unless that one goes horribly wrong, I will not look at any of the rest of them. If that one goes horribly wrong, I might backtrack one to make sure you didn't submit the wrong file. All right. Are we all happy with this?
No.
Now, the output all runs together. And at this point, I haven't told you it shouldn't. If this bugs you, because I do every now and then get some people that want it to be very clean and pretty, feel free to put in spaces. How do you print a space? You do print with nothing inside the parentheses, and it just will print a blank line between things. So if I wanted to do that, I could just come in here and go, well, before we start printing anything for part 2, I'm just going to go. And it just will give me a blank line between part 1's output and part 2's output. Yes, sir. You have an error. I will check it in just a second. So, oddly enough, that is all of lab 2. The grading scale is down here if you want to look at it. Honestly, since I'm doing these in class with you, what I do is I run it. If the output looks right, I just check it and go. Because we did it together, there's no reason you shouldn't have exactly what you have. I'm going to stop the video now and come around and help anybody that has individual questions. And unless you have a question that you think will benefit the online students, give me just a second to shut it down and I will check on what's going on. Otherwise, you are free to go.